Hey everyone, this is Rick Morgan. I had some fun with some of the newer, or the newest, I believe, type of CBCS, slabs today that someone kindly sent to me. And yeah, they were very much more difficult to open and reseal. I don't even think I have some ideas on how I would be successful, but I don't think I was successful at all. I'll show you some photos of how this thing looks. Oh, that's a video of after. Let me see if I can find you some photos of what this looks like initially. So this is the rear of the book. I'll just show you this part right here. And you've got this slab, you've got a pin here and a pin here. And this whole seam here where it's overlapped is ultrasonically welded together. And it's a clamshell. There's like one kind of cup inside of another cup shape. So it's not just two surfaces that meet. So it's much more difficult to get a tool in there. And this plastic, this material melts at a much lower temperature. So it just kind of goos up and blobs. It's not really good for that. So here's what the front looks like. You can see this. You can't really see the pins here because the paper's in the way. Here's the side. This is this seam I was telling you about. And you can see where one of the pins is here. This is the bottom pin. And there's a little closer image of this bottom pin. And the idea I was going to try to do later to separate this, since I couldn't heat it, was to use a laser with a focusing depth of field that's a little further in the book. So it's the hottest points right here, and you just melt it as a glob there, and then you can just separate it. But then it's sealed all around here, so you have that other problem too. Here's the bottom left, and you can see this sealing surface looks like as if it were ultrasonically welded around the whole surface, which is really hard to separate. And oh, there's just some video stuff. So anyway, hang in, see what I did. I mostly failed, so just if you don't want to watch the whole thing. But I hope you enjoy it. Take care. Bye-bye. This is the initial condition of this first case. You can see what it looks like here. Showing you all four corners for a record. Now, this is the standard bane of the existence of the CGC cases. Let's see how the CBCS case holds up. I'm just going to get this little pin warm. I can already tell by looking at it this isn't going to work. The pin is much further away from the corner, and there's two layers of plastic, not just one in between the pin and the outer edge. So that is unlikely to work, but let's try it and see what happens. Let's try a little trick I learned with the CGC cases that made them break open earlier, which is to put them in the freezer and then do it. So that my first attempt did not work. So let's freeze it and then try it. And I start here by just warming this up, mostly focusing on the post in the corner. I immediately noticed that there's a big difference between this and the CGC cases. One is this plastic melts at a lower temperature, so the whole thing's likely to goober up more quickly, and there's so much more plastic between the post, and the post is further from the edge, that the post is not melting before the external plastic. I just don't get in there very easily, and this plastic starts to sort of lose its integrity and is melting. You can watch here as I'm trying to get in there. This is a direct approach near the post, but I'm going to give up on this soon and then try another corner where I try to split the plastic open and then blow the heat in through a gap in a split that I make in the case, and that doesn't work either. I'll show you in a moment. This is essentially a lost cause here. This isn't going anywhere. You can see that this plastic, even when it's cool to the touch now, is remaining like really, really pliable. And it's just gooey and stretchy. This is just to give you an impression. I'm doing this in excess to give you an impression of how gooey this material actually is. It's not splitting, but stretching. In this case, I'm focusing more on the sides of the case than the actual pin itself. I'm hoping to get some separation so that maybe I can get an air gap. And if I get an air gap, I can maybe get the heat gun in that space, and maybe I can get the pin to give up the ghost. The problem is that pin is sealed, and then the whole thing is ultrasonically sealed all the way around. So if you crack it, the crack could spider out and be sort of obvious. I'm able to get it to crack sort of a straight line, and I've got some ideas about how to handle that in the future, but not really. So I'm going to open this up and see if I can force, with some tools, I'm going to force some air into that one corner. So I was able to work a gap into this case, and so now I'm trying to get some warm air into there with a little bit of tension on it. I tried to get it along the screwdriver, but I feared I was putting some hot air on the book was going to melt the sleeve to the book. So I'm attempting to get the spring, the pin to loosen up here. But I wasn't successful, and I just gave up on this particular one. It was bending, it was warped. You could tell that it had been tampered with, and this sort of idea of putting it under tension and then heating, which would have, I'm sure, worked very well in the CGC cases, is not working here, and this book just became kind of a mess. Again, the melting happened before the release, so there was no hope of resealing this particular slab. Here's what this slab looked like afterward. It's a complete mess. This is me just testing the properties of the plastic to see how I can stretch it. But you can see the 9 on the 9.0, it transferred to the plastic directly. So now I'm going to put a book in the laser and scribe it to see if I can cut a scribe mark to encourage it to break in a nice, even, and straight line. Here's how the book is mounted, and I'm going to run a laser right up the seam to see if I can just make a thin line that encourages this thing to crack in place along a straight line. And so here I go. I'm going to go ahead and start this. You can see the laser starting here. It's going to cut a nice, even line that's 0.025 millimeters wide, and that should encourage a propagating crack right along that line. Here it goes from another angle. I had to take several passes to get a line that I thought was deep enough to encourage a crack propagation, and I should have spent more time like cutting just where the pins were. Maybe I could have just cut the pins out, but this is essentially what it looks like. I think a little less cutting would have been better because this looks a little barbecued here. The object of this was to see if we cut a scribe line, can we break the case without it spidering everywhere? And that's the case. It does help it break in a straight line, but the edges where I cut it were too messy. I should have just cut one time and hope and see if that helps me break a straight line, which I'll do next. But there's a little crack in the middle there, but it largely does. That scribe line helps the case break in a straight line. Now I didn't need to make this much of it, but I'm trying to explore and see how much that helps in getting the book out. Yeah, this is not, I mean, obviously this is not going to fool anybody, but we're learning, and to learn, we are learning that the scribing does help. I still had to break those pins at the end, and that didn't help, so we want to make it so we don't have to break the pins so much. So that'll be our next step, is to try to help that. Yeah, this one's, it's a mess. Not easily, well, not resealable at all, honestly. Like a dummy, I accidentally did this in slow motion, so it's dark and looks weird, but this is going to be an image of me trying to cut the pin out with a laser. And I tried to do a deep focus, but I need to get a new lens for it. But I'm cutting it, and I'm trying to cut it out so that it snaps apart more easily. And then I'm going to laser scribe the sides and see what happens. Of course, this is far from subtle, but that's what it looks like when you just laser out just the pin itself. The purpose being to try to understand how much easier it is to separate this case when the pins are not present, and you don't have to worry about them at all. And then if that's helpful, then we can figure out more subtle ways to do that. All right, this particular book I did not laser scribe the sides, just to see how much relief just the pins being gone gives me. So the pins are out. They've been lasered out, this one side. And I just take this tool here, and I'm prying it open, and it just sort of, in this case, it does sort of pop right open. It's far from unobvious, right? It's not like exactly stealth opening, but it's not as miserable and nasty as that first one I looked. So I got the book out. It looks like this now. It looks like it's been opened clearly, but it's not terrible. The point was to see if getting rid of those pins makes it easier to open, and it certainly did. But it is super obvious that it's been opened, and way harder than the CGC case. This is so much harder and so much more secure. Well, there you have it, folks. To much popular requests, I have tried to get into the newer CBCS case. It is hard. What makes it harder? One is it's one clamshell cupped case over the other. So one's like this and one fits over and then it's sealed, which makes it really difficult to find some purchase. Then the pins are further in from the corner, so they're not as easy to get hot and to melt. The plastic, whatever this material is, I guess I should put that on the FTIR and see what it is, melts at a lower temperature. So it just, instead of getting warm so that we can just the pin, the whole thing goobers up right away. It just was very difficult to get this thing apart and was not unobvious at all. I did what little things did I learn. One is that if you scribe the plastic, you could use a diamond stylus or tungsten carbide stylus. Maybe I used a laser, made a little line. It cuts, it snaps on a much more clean line. And if you're able to do something about those pins, I used a laser and cut them out entirely. I overdid it. But if you adjusted your focus and you had a finer lens, I could have changed the lens on the laser. I can probably still do that. You can adjust the depth so that the hottest part of the laser is below the surface, since it's transparent, and you could melt that. You could get it open, but if you do that, it's still obvious. At least on my third attempt, it was still obvious that it had been tampered with. Now that everybody's looking at them, of course, you'll notice it right away. So anyway, I hope this video helps. I've got like 6 or 7 more cases to work with, so I'm going to have some fun with that. Try different things, maybe liquid nitrogen. That might be a fun thing to try. Put that in there and see if I can just snap it open. And that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Take care. Bye-bye.